Right, Kopites, welcome back to the channel. So it's official then. The 1892 holdings has been confirmed as having 30% shares in Liverpool Football Club. So it does include Jeff Bezos. But what I want to do is I want to look at the actual details of it. But what I want to say before we get started, don't get overexcited. Yes, we've got Jeff Bezos as a shareholder, but there's a lot more to it than that. He isn't going to be on the board. But let's take a look and see what is actually happening. So, just bear with me a second, guys. I'm just reading through my notes. After days of reports, speculation and plenty of nonsense on social media, YNWA Sports Group have now confirmed the sale of a significant minority stake in Liverpool Football Club to a consortium called 1892 Holdings. And yes, Jeff Bezos is now part of the ownership structure at Liverpool Football Club. But before anyone starts saying Liverpool have been bought by Amazon, they haven't. And that's exactly why we're doing this video, because there is a hell of a lot to unpack here. We're talking about approximately 30% of Liverpool Football Club, a deal worth around 1.65 billion, putting the club's valuation at approximately 5.5 billion pounds. FSG remain the majority owners. They retain operational control. But Amit Bhatia becomes Liverpool's new vice chairman, and the consortium gets representation on the board. So, what does this actually mean for Liverpool? And perhaps the biggest question of all, could this be the beginning of something much bigger? Let's get into it. So number one, the deal is official. Let's start with what we actually know. This isn't a rumour anymore. FSG have confirmed an agreement with 1892 Holdings for approximately a 30% stake in Liverpool. The reported value of the transaction is around 1.65 billion. That puts Liverpool's overall valuation at approximately 5.5 billion pounds. Think about that for a second. FSG bought Liverpool in 2010 for around 300 million. And now roughly 30% of the club has been valued at 1.65 billion. That tells you just how dramatically the value of Liverpool Football Club has increased during FSG's ownership. Number two, who is actually the 1892 Holdings? Now this is where social media is already getting it wrong. This isn't simply Jeff Bezos buys Liverpool. The consortium is called 1892 Holdings, named after the year Liverpool Football Club was founded. And it's led by Amit Bhatia. Bhatia is a businessman who has extensive experience in football, including his previous involvement with Queen's Park Rangers. He's backed by several very wealthy investment groups. There's the Mittal Family Trust. There's K5 Sports with Jeff Bezos as its lead investor. And there's EE Capital, the family office of Eduardo and Elaine Savarin. So you've got an extremely wealthy group of investors coming together to acquire this stake. Number three, no, Jeff Bezos doesn't now run Liverpool. And this is probably the most important thing to clear up. Jeff Bezos does not own 30% of Liverpool personally. And he isn't becoming Liverpool's chairman. He isn't becoming the club's owner. And he isn't taking a seat on the board. Bezos is the lead investor in K5 Sports, which is part of the consortium. The people joining the Liverpool board from the consortium are Amit Bhatia, Elaine Savarin and Brian Bourne of K5. Bezos himself remains a passive investor and won't have a board seat. Who runs Liverpool at the moment? FSG. That's really important. FSG remain Liverpool's majority share owners. They retain operational control. There is no change to the day-to-day running of Liverpool Football Club as a result of this deal. So if you see people saying Bezos has taken control of Liverpool, no, not today. That's simply not what has happened. But Amit Bhatia's role is very important. Now, here's where this becomes much more interesting. Amit Bhatia isn't just buying shares and sitting somewhere in the background. He is becoming Liverpool's new vice chairman, and he'll sit on the club's expanded board. That's significant because although 1892 Holdings doesn't control Liverpool, this is not a passive investment where the new investors have no voice. They now have people sitting inside Liverpool's governance structure, and Bhatia is going to be the most visible representative of that group. That's how I think Liverpool supporters should watch. That's something, I think Liverpool supporters should watch very closely. What does 1.65 billion actually buy? Here's where I want to separate ownership from influence. 30% doesn't automatically equal 30% of the decision making. The exact governance agreements matter, and we now know the consortium has board representation. So they've got a significant financial investment, plus board representation, plus the vice chairmanship, plus access to the senior leadership of Liverpool Football Club. But FSG still have the majority. So right now the balance of power remains with FSG. That's the factual position. Number 7. Does this change Liverpool's transfer budget? Here's another one we need to kill immediately. No. Jeff Bezos hasn't just handed Andoni Iraola a 1.65 billion transfer budget. That's not how this works. The 1.65 billion is the purchase price for the shares. It doesn't suddenly become Liverpool's transfer money, and the reporting around the deal indicates that there is no immediate change to Liverpool's transfer strategy or summer budget. So if you're expecting Liverpool to suddenly go out and spend around 300 million because Bezos has arrived, that's not what's happening. So why do it? This is where I think things get really interesting, because Liverpool are already an incredibly valuable football club. They generate a record 703 million in revenue for the year ending May 2025. So this consortium isn't buying into a club that needs rescuing. They're buying into one of the biggest and most commercially powerful sports brands in the world. And that's where the potential upside comes in. Bezos, Bhatia, Savarin, the retail interests, they aren't people who need Liverpool to suddenly become a different football club overnight. They're potentially looking at the long-term commercial growth of the asset, particularly in such areas as India, Asia, technology and global business. And if Liverpool can grow revenue substantially over the next 5 or 10 years, that makes the underlying asset even more valuable. Now let's talk about FSG, and this is where things get controversial, because we've been talking for days about whether this could eventually become an outright sale. So let's be very clear. FSG are not saying we're selling Liverpool. In fact, FSG have stressed that this investment is not part of an exit strategy. They remain majority owners. They retain operational control, and there is no obligation for FSG to sell another percentage of the club. So if somebody tells you Liverpool are being sold in stages, we cannot say that. There is no evidence today that an outright takeover has been agreed. Number 10, but. And here's the bit that I think makes this worth watching. The structure does leave flexibility for 1892 Holdings to potentially acquire more of Liverpool in the future if FSG decide to sell more. That's important. It doesn't mean they're going to. It doesn't mean FSG have agreed to sell, and it doesn't mean there's a timetable, but there is a potential pathway there. And if we come back to it in 2 or 3 years and discover that 1892 Holdings have increased its stake, then suddenly we're looking at today's deal in a very different way. Number 11, and this is where my theory comes in. Now this is where I'm going to separate fact from my own theory. I want to make that absolutely clear. I'm not saying this is what's happening. I'm saying that this is something I'm going to watch. I've been saying throughout this story that I could see the possibility of this 30% being phase 1. Not because we have proof that FSG are prepared to sell Liverpool. We don't. But because if you're an investment group and you've just put approximately 1.65 billion into Liverpool, you've clearly got a long-term interest in the club. And if over time the group becomes increasingly involved, if their stake increases, if their influence increases, then we might eventually look back at this story and say, that was the beginning. But today, that's a theory, not a fact. Number 12, what about the football side? This is another part I'm really interested in. Because we've already seen major changes around Liverpool's football operation, Michael Edwards has left. We've got Andoni Iraola as head coach. We're seeing a different direction in terms of recruitment. And now we've got a new major shareholder entering the building. But according to the current information, there is no immediate change to the football leadership or day-to-day running of the club as a result of this investment. So I wouldn't sit here and tell you Bhatia is going to choose the next sporting director. We don't have evidence for that. That's exactly where we have to be disciplined. Number 13, could this help Liverpool long term? Absolutely. But probably not in the way some people think. The benefit isn't 1.65 billion into transfers, it's potentially 1.65 billion of external validation of Liverpool's value. Now new commercial relationships, new markets, new business expertise, technology, global expansion, India, Asia, and ultimately more revenue. And under football's financial regulations, increased sustainable revenue is what gives clubs greater capacity to invest over time. So the real impact of this deal might not be visible this summer. It could be visible 3, 5 or 10 years from now. Number 14, and now the multi-club question. There's another subject we've discussed privately over the last few days, the multi-club model. FSG had explored expanding its football portfolio, but that strategy was shelved. Could this new consortium revive that ambition? Potentially. But again, there is no confirmation that they are planning to do this. So I'm not going to tell you Liverpool are about to buy a club in Spain, France, Brazil or Argentina. We don't know that. But given the financial resources and football experience within this consortium, it's certainly something I'd be watching. Because if Liverpool eventually develop a multi-club network, that could have major implications for recruitment and player development. But for now, theory, not news. Number 15. So what happens now? That's the question I'm most interested in, because the deal isn't simply about what happens today. It's about what happens next. I want to see how visible is Amit Bhatia at Liverpool. What role does he actually play as vice chairman? How much influence does the consortium have? Does FSG eventually reduce its holding? Does the football structure change? Does the multi-club strategy return? And ultimately, does this remain a 30% investment, or does it become something more? So, my verdict. So where do I stand? Today is not a Liverpool takeover. FSG remain the majority owners. FSG retain operational control. Jeff Bezos isn't running Liverpool, and the consortium hasn't been handed control of the football department. Those are the facts. But I don't think we should underestimate what has happened. The group, including some of the wealthiest and most powerful investors in the world, has just put approximately 1.65 billion into Liverpool Football Club. Amit Bhatia becomes vice chairman. The consortium gets board representation, and there is flexibility for that relationship to develop further if FSG ever choose to sell more. So I'm not going to sit here and say Liverpool will be owned by this consortium within 12 months. But I can't prove that. But I'm also not going to dismiss the possibility, because today's deal has created something that didn't exist yesterday. A major new power block inside Liverpool Football Club. So there you go, guys. Like I say, I wouldn't expect Liverpool to go out and start spending stupid money. But I can actually see now what could happen. In my opinion, and again this is just my opinion, Richard Hughes will go in September. And I think Amit Bhatia will be the person that chooses the new sporting director. And then it's going to have to be done quickly. We're going to have to get 5 or 6 players in. Like it's just said in my notes, we made 703 million in revenue in May 2025. So surely now that this consortium deal's done, more things are going to come out, in my opinion, over the coming days. That's it for this video. Take it easy.